So we're going to start because we've got 90 minutes and we'll probably use every second of that time. Thank you everybody so much for coming along. It's going to be a ride. I don't know what kind of ride it's going to be, but it'll be one of the thrills and spills and corners. But it's just a ride, to quote the immortal Bill Hicks. Right.
Oh, hi, Peace. Peace is here. Kevin's here. Hello.
All good. Are you muted? Yeah, everyone's muted. You're going to have to put up with listening to us for the next hour and a half. If you have specific burning questions that are related to what we're talking about, then you can put them in the chat. I will read them out to the guys. It might help for you three guys actually to close your chat, because otherwise you'll, there'll be stuff popping up all the time and distracting you from the business of the day.
I'm used to that.
Okay.
It's nice.
Yeah, we're pros.
Yeah, multitasking.
We can multitask.
Awesome. I don't think we need to really introduce ourselves not to this audience, but there will be people coming along to the webinar, to the recording, who maybe don't know who we are. So do you guys want to just take a minute each and say a little bit about the journey that's brought you to this point?
Sure. Should we go left to right? Shall I go? I can be quick. Yeah, well, I'm Phil Escott, and I've kind of healed myself of psoriatic arthritis, and along the way learned more than is my business to learn, really. And it's been a great journey. It's been fun. So I wrote a book called Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, which was a Kindle bestseller. And now a lot of you, I think, are from my 100% carnivore group. And we've come together here to dole out some wonderful information and to have some fun with everybody. So, that's it for me, really. I do some consults and stuff and help people along and see some lovely healing with these very simple methods that we're going to be dealing with today. So over to you, Ben.
Right, okay. So I'm Ben Hunt. I've got my own journey, I suppose. I've been through the mill of religion and spirituality and tried to be fit, and been down a few different paths with personal development, and just really basically trying to figure out what is the authentic kind of human existence and how can I be the best version of myself that I can possibly be. And I stumbled into the rabbit hole of 100% carnivore through, bizarre kind of way. It started with trying to garden, trying to grow my own food, and then discovering the importance of soil, then getting to regenerative agriculture and ethical omnivorism and stuff like that. And then I just stumbled across Phil's group. We got talking, and he brought me into this fledgling team of awesome brains, and down the rabbit hole I went, and there's no getting out. So, Graeme.
Hi, my name's Graeme Norbury. I have a background in finance, and I spent 30 years working in the stock market, but I've always had a sort of an underlying interest in biology, for want of a better word. I've paid fairly close attention to medicine, and during my time in the stock market, I used to sort of help out following pharmaceutical companies and interpreting whether the products they had might be useful or feasible. But I was more involved in sort of analysing complex systems, which is effectively how the stock market and the financial markets hang together. I then, as I became middle-aged, about sort of 15 years ago, began to be aware of my own mortality, shall we say. I became a father around the same time, and so I began to look into ways of staying healthy, staying alive for longer, and bringing up healthy children. As part of that journey, I came across an amazing doctor in the US called Dr. Jack Kruse, who has his own quite unique take on how health and life and organisms and everything work together, which he puts concisely into three terms of everything works based on light, water, and magnetism. And those three things, which he argues very, very, very carefully and very well, he can fundamentally break down every activity in the human body into those three factors. And once you become convinced of the science behind his story, and then you become aware that doctors don't know anything about light, water, nor magnetism, it becomes clear that we perhaps have a disconnect between the people who are supposed to be taking care of us and the fundamentals that are actually taking place at a cellular level. So I was very interested in the deep science, and I met Phil through Dr. Jack Cruz. And I became interested in sharing the knowledge that I had, which is what brought me to link up with Phil, with Jeremy, and ultimately with Ben. So I'm not the brains of the group by any means, but I'm someone who's been willing to delve into the deep science and do the sort of do the many hours of research that it takes to understand that. So that's my role in this, I suppose. Over to Jeremy, who's muted.
Thank you, London, because I'm currently in the wonderful country Canada. But first of all, everyone who's turned up so far, welcome. Anyone who's watching this recording, also welcome, and hopefully you're going to get a great deal out of this. Graeme is a little bit too polite. He's absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to talk about all of them because I feel extraordinarily fortunate to have met these chaps, because the combined knowledge together is quite exceptional. And also we have, very naughty, humorous times in between. So it's kind of a win-win for the way we are in a very complex fields that we are actually dealing with, in the seriousness. So I'm Dr. Jeremy Ayres. I was trained in what I call classical osteopathy, because most of these arts have changed quite dramatically now. I then studied naturopathy under the brilliant Barbara Wren, who's quite a genius of our time, I would say. And then, like most people that are within the fields and are doing any good work that I particularly respect, the rest of the time it is almost unending research over the last 30 years to discover why we're not healing such serious diseases of our modern times. And once you get into any sort of realms of serious research, and I'm sure the chaps and many of you listening will agree, it isn't very long before you realize great walls are put up in front of you and things are not quite what they seem. So the last 30 years has really been removing those barriers to get to the core truths. I think that's what I call it, the foundational core truths. And once you've established that, which is what this course and the Human Unleashed and Through is all about, and what we're going to be teaching over these months and years, is how to put all those together as a philosophy, to be able to look at almost anything and be able to come back and understand it better, and then be able to give back and help people to either heal themselves, because in my history, some of you are on here, I think, know me and know my work. I've had just about everything come to see me that others haven't been able to help, and we've usually been able to help it by understanding these greater truths and bringing them together. And I'm very, very excited, actually, because for 20 years it was very demanding, very isolated. And in the last 10 years, certainly in the last 5 years, and the internet has a lot to do with it, all of a sudden we see these actually wonderful medical doctors, wonderful scientists, wonderful people in what I would call sort of the mainstream, starting to emerge, not only listening to good people like ourselves, but very often way ahead of us. But with our philosophy, we can grab the work, go, yeah, that's why it works. So it's a very exciting time. And this group here, I feel extremely privileged to be part of it. Thanks, Ben.
Awesome. So it would be great if we could tell you in 2 minutes flat what the Human Unleashed is, but I don't think that's really feasible. All we can do is start to sketch out why this work that's going on right now is so important and why it may be relevant to you in your life. I'm sure you already have some idea. I'm sure that whatever journey you've personally been on that you'll have had experiences along the way when you've come up against what we might call a conventional culture, the conventional medical system, the conventional food system, all of these kinds of things we're going to touch on. So we will be talking about health, but it's a lot more than health, because I think that health is almost like, you know, the price of entry. That's like the low bar that we're looking at. Being healthful, being healthy, having energy, and the kind of positive outlook to life and the potential that then opens up for you. And then, you know, the question is, well, what do we do with that? So, you know, that's why we haven't named this program after health or anything else. It's literally unleashing your maximum human potential. So please bear with us, indulge us while we sketch out what that is going to mean. And we also have to acknowledge and be very honest at this point that we don't actually know completely what it means, because it's a journey, right? It's work in progress, and we would like you to be part of that work in progress. So why don't we start, guys, by talking about the epidemic of dis-ease that is in the world today. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm 46, in my lifetime, I just think back to when I was at school, when I was 8 or 9 at school, I knew one kid who had an inhaler for asthma. I knew one kid when I was, I think, 11 and went to a different school that had bad eczema on his skin, right? Nowadays, everyone has got asthma, eczema, ADHD, autism or autistic spectrum disorder, or something else. Right? It seems as though, even just in the space of a few short decades, that human health, aside from anything else, is starting to crumble. Why?
Yeah. Well, let me have a go at that to start with. I think one thing that we're using a lot here, whenever we've met up quite recently, 2 or 3 times, and we've made so many recordings already to put out on the website. Where we start off with a subject. You know, we had a bit of paper here. We had a bit of paper which had all the subjects on, and we thought, right, let's spend 5 minutes on each one, and it just didn't happen. You know, it was half an hour, it was 45 minutes, it was an hour and 10, and we just, you know, we got about a quarter of the way through the first page that we had written down. And what came to light was, what's so wonderful about this group of people is whenever I look at somebody who does webinars, who has membership groups, things like that, when you look at them, they're absolutely brilliant, but you're taking little bits, you know, and let's take a little bit from here, take a little bit from there. I think nature, to have a sort of bit of a hippie outlook on it, nature's kind of brought the 3 of us together, with Ben keeping us in order and whatever, to have a completely different view of everything. Graeme's got this fantastic analytical mind and understands right down to the cellular level, you know, of light and deuterium and much, much more. And so much practical experience of all of these things too. Jeremy, he's had decades of healing people. You know, well, let's not say that. He's just enabling them to heal themselves. You know, this is the important thing, to put the power back to them. And I have, my view is very much from the inside, from that sort of N=1 thing. Although, you know, my experience has grown enormously over the past few years, helping other people. I've seen them do the same thing. But what is so cool about this is just that we all have this same view that there's pretty much one illness, and that's mitochondrial disruption. And this comes from all areas. Once the mitochondria are working brilliantly, then the body works brilliantly. Everything's tied in, whether it's environment, the ancestral thing, you know, all the disconnects from when we were really healthy and didn't have all these chronic diseases like I fell foul of. And once you get those all lined up, it's beautiful. But when you've got one person, just one person, you tend to miss a few things. Everybody's got beautiful areas of expertise, but we complement each other so well with filling in the little holes, you know, in each other's knowledge and in each other's experience. So what you're getting here is 3 guys who get on ridiculously well, and it kind of feels like we've known each other all our lives. And then Ben came in, and it feels just the same, you know. So the whole vibe about this thing is absolutely fantastic. And so when we answer a question, it's difficult to shut us up because we all have these different little perspectives on it from our own experience. So this is what I think is so great about this team here, and that we'd like you to, you know, come along and be a part of this every month, where we're doing webinars every month, and there'll be so much content, and God knows what we'll come up with. But, you know, that will be structured on the website. You'll be able to see that at the Human Unleashed. But,
so on the subject of answering questions, the specific question, Phil, remains, what the hell, you know, do we think it is true that human health is crumbling?
Oh, it's tanking. Absolutely. Of course it is. And this is because there's so many mitochondrial disruptors coming up. Just take one example to start with, where people go, oh, well, my grandparents ate this and they lived to 105. That's absolutely fine for the grandparents. You know, they could get away with a whole load more because they didn't have so many disruptors that we have these days. So what we cover is absolutely everything, from the Wi-Fi to the artificial light, emotional stuff, absolutely everything that can disrupt the mitochondria. And that's why human health has tanked in every single area. We've messed up now. I'm going to pass on to somebody else because I've been wittering on too long. So we need to see everybody's perspective on these things without.
Can I be tag team there, young Phyllis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but not on camera.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you're going to want to join us on this journey, you're going to need to put your big girl pants on, because if we're actually going to, as adults, although I think the four of us here, you know, often don't feel like we're adults, even though we're doing very grown-up things. But if you're going to actually get to the bottom of the problems, the causes, to then discover the solutions, you're going to have to look at things that are not comfortable, and you're going to have to look at, see if they've got any merit, despite a lot of mudslinging and name calling, what have you, when you go into these realms. And this is what we will be doing. So what do I mean by that in reference to Ben's question? Well, in the good old days of investigative journalism, when the news wasn't owned by 5 or 6 corporations around the world, the basic premise of follow the money to get to the truth, the root of things, which has really been lost in the mainstream now per se, and is really taken up by you know, individual journalists who have their own blog or what have you, and some of them are doing some phenomenal work, as I've discovered. But if you go to any country, certainly where every time I've traveled or spoken to people, I treat people all over the world via Skype and things, and you ask them this simple question: over the last 50 years, do you feel or believe that people have gotten healthier or sicker? And to this day, and I've been asking this question for over 10 years, I don't even tend to finish the question. They're already nodding their head and going, much sicker. So it seems to me, unless, you know, you're trapped in some other dimension, that the vast majority of people are completely aware that as a people, whatever country that is, we've gotten much, much sicker. And so one has to ask the question, who benefits? And because we're involved in several projects now, and some of those projects are with business people, and the kind of business people we really want to work with, because they're interested in win-wins as opposed to the corporate structure of how much can we, I don't think you can say the word fuck you during a webinar, but that's basically the corporate structure. How much can we screw you and get away with it? But we're working with business people, are working on the win-win scenario, which is very appealing. But they look at things from a business point of view, and they can see quite clearly that medicine has been far too successful in creating clients. And I know that's offensive to some people, but you have to ask yourself, bearing in mind that medicine is currently pretty much run by the pharmaceutical company, which the Lancet and the New York, I think it's the New York Journal of Medicine, all know and have reported about as well. It's pretty much run by pharmaceuticals. What kind of clients do you need? Well, you need sick ones. Well, how do you make people sick? Well, you educate them stupid, in my experience. So I know some of these are kind of like dunk, 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 but that's what we're going to have to be looking at. So from a business point of view, these people have seen that medicine has got so incredibly successful at creating clients and are completely unable to deal with the chronic diseases. We'll talk about acutes later on, perhaps. And so there's a real problem of, you know, massively declining confidence coming down. You know, it's prevalent. If you're not aware of it, I'm sure you are if you're on this course, prevalent that, you know, there's so many angry people out there that feel failed by medicine and the system and what have you. So it's coming down. At the same time, this information, I like to call it true medicine, is coming up, where we're starting to look at what caused this. Well, if you were to sit a multiple choice exam and you didn't know a single answer, apparently you'll get about half right, if it's A or B, right? When you look at what we've been educated in every realm, in every country to believe what is correct and normal and natural, you'll see pretty much it's always upside down, pretty much. And therefore that can't be correct. So therefore there is guiding hands who have benefited from the masses, who have been basically working their butts off to try and keep their head above water, and been getting sicker and sicker. So what this is all about is the other side as you come into Thu is, yes, we're going to talk about all these wonderful things and all these wonderful stories, but put your big girl pants on, because we're going to have a discussion, and it is ongoing, of all the elements that got us into this ease in the first place.
So they talk about, there's this saying that a patient cured is a customer lost, right? And when you are living in a world where healthcare, which is a very, very inaccurate term anyway, it's more like sickness management, not healthcare. When healthcare is run by corporations, and when you have to think about corporations actually have a duty, the fiduciary duty of a corporation is to make as much fucking money as possible. Excuse my French, right? They've got to make as much money as possible. Otherwise, they are actually almost acting illegally, right? You know, they can be sued by their shareholders for not making as much money as possible. So that's why you get the price of insulin, you know, in the USA is something like 20 times higher than it is in Canada and 50 times higher than it is in India, right? So, you know, it's actually irresponsible from a corporation's perspective to cure people, right? So let's just pull one thing out. Let's that we haven't mentioned so far. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes in particular, is now, I would say, at epidemic level globally. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
And we can trace some of that back to Ansel Keys in the 1950s, and who was, let's say, hired or sponsored to write scientific, put together some scientific evidence, which would then go towards national dietary guidelines. And what he wrote basically was that saturated fat is the enemy, it causes heart disease and stuff like that, and sugar's good, right? And this is just, you know, one example of many. And all of this stuff, by the way, you know, completely, as I'm seeing more and more, fits together. You know, health, weight, self-image, emotional health, energy, confidence, personal power, all of it, and money, you know, and all of this, everything interrelates. And that's why, you know, this program, you know, holistic is a very, very good word, I would say, for it. But yeah, I mean, you know, what have we got to say about diabetes?
If I can just jump in,
Yeah.
and get back, we'll tackle diabetes because it's all interrelated. We are diabetes, autism, Alzheimer's. They're all basically a continuum of effectively the same underlying cause. And going back, we have to also look back at what's happened in the last 100, 120 years, because that's really when things have started to go very, very downhill. We've noticed it accelerate, the decline in health has definitely accelerated over the last 20 or 40 years. And there's no single factor. But as Jeremy touched upon, if you look across all the advice that we're given in any area of our life, it's almost always completely wrong. It's not just that the experts get it slightly wrong. The advice we're given is almost across the board completely wrong. And you've got an enormous number of factors that in play. You've got a situation where we invented electricity, which enabled us to use artificial light at night. That disrupted our sleep patterns. It exposed us to sort of damaging, to light when we're not expected to see light. We changed the food that we ate with the advent of mechanization, which occurred around the same time. You had sort of mechanization in farming, the late 19th century, early 20th century. That meant that it was incredibly profitable to harvest seed oils using combine harvesters, for example, and to use factory processes, sort of the oil refinery type processes to process the seed oils. And so once you establish that you can produce a form of fat in the form of a seed oil, such as, let's say, sunflower oil, and the alternative at the time was lard or beef tallow, which is a very labor intensive. It's very healthy, very, very healthy fat, which people lived on for years and lived very healthily. If you find yourself in a position where you can produce vast acres of sunflower seeds and harvest them with one man on a combine harvester, compared to the hundreds or thousands of people that we need to take care of livestock, to kill the livestock, to butcher them, to render down the fats. And then you have the issue of the fats. Saturated fat typically is not liquid at room temperature, whereas seed oils are liquid. So seed oils will run smoothly through a factory-style industrial refinery, whereas the solid oils won't. So you have all these issues at play, and there's a profit motive. And so it's clear that someone's going to try to push the seed oils because they're more profitable, but the public won't accept them unless the public receives reassurance or guidance from someone such as Ansel Keys to say that, no, these are the things we should be eating. Around the same time, you had a change in medicine. Medicine was extremely diverse. So 120 years ago, it pretty much policed itself. There were hundreds or thousands of different styles of I don't know what you call them, sort of traveling doctors, people who were willing to try and cure you from whatever ailment. Some of them were obviously sort of false and made false claims, but the market pretty much policed itself, because if some guy sold a product and it didn't work, he had to move on to somewhere else, and he would eventually run out of customers because word would get around that his product didn't work. And if some way of healing did work, then that became more popular. But around the same time, in the 1920s, 1930s, the same group of industrialists who were involved with the introduction of electricity and involved with the mechanization of factories and food production, that same group of industrialists became involved in rationalizing the medical system. And they put in place a system of medical education so that the only schools were the schools sponsored by these specifically industrialists. So we have this confluence of events which has taken place over the last 120 years. And then we've moved in the last 30 or 40 years, we've moved into sort of broadcast communications. We've started transmitting microwave signals across the globe. And we've started to produce even more powerful lights, which are even more damaging to our health. We've produced mobile telephones, we've produced Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all these different things. And they're all fundamentally sponsored, paid for and promoted by the same people using the same media organizations. And so all of those people have a vested interest in making us ill, or at least dumbing us down to a point that we don't question what they're doing to us. And so it's a very, very complex subject. There's no one single answer which says this is why we're getting sicker, but it's a combination of these things. And when you break them down, and you can break them down into individual factors, and we will do this, we will go through this in great detail, because it's an incredibly interesting story. It's genius. I mean, if we were on the other side and we were there living on our private islands and just we were one of the 0.1% in the world that was incredibly wealthy thanks to all of this success, we'd be patting ourselves on the back saying, what a genius plan that was. I mean, it's incredibly devious, but very, very interesting and thrilling to work through and to understand. But once you break it down, you begin to see that, you know, we've really had the wool pulled over our eyes for 100 years, and they continue to do so. But it's not impossible to escape from it. You can strip it away, and you can break down the individual factors. And once you understand, as Phil mentioned, once you understand that the mitochondria is the sort of, it's the ultimate sensory organ in the body. It is what senses the environment. And once you begin to understand that that's how we respond to the signals from the environment, you can then begin to strip away the fake or the incorrect signals that these industrialists have introduced into our lives. And then you begin to understand how to truly reverse disease and get back to a position that we were in the times of our great-grandparents.
Yeah, can I jump in there? Just something occurred to me. If there's anybody out there saying, well, you know, I'm not too well at the moment, I don't know what to do, I don't know the exact routes to take. I know exactly where you were. When I got sick, it was about 2010, and there was nowhere near the information out there that there is now. And the amount of digging I had to do, and I'd even written books on health, and I was so wrong. I thought I was way ahead even of the mainstream. And now what we're trying to do here is to be able to really, really save you time. You know, you can come into this Human Unleashed membership group, and you know, it cost me something like, as far as I can see, something in the region of £350,000, you know, over the years, to actually sit there and waste away everything that I had. I was very fortunate I had this at the time, but you know, this is how much it cost me to sit on the sofa and support my family and just research 12 hours a day. And I'm sure you've all got lives to get on with, and things that you want to get back to if you're feeling that you're in some dis-ease. So, you know, what we can do is take you there an awful lot quicker. For me, it was such a tortuous path of taking so many wrong turns. And then eventually you start to look at all the real experts out there ahead of the crowd. You find out these doctors are finding out exactly what I found out in exactly the same places, you know. And that's what's wonderful now about these citizen scientists like Graeme here, who just understands exactly what's going on a cellular level. I can tell you what it's like from the inside out to feel how to discover these things without having to trawl through all this crap that's out there. We don't have everything right. But I tell you what, I have 1,000 things more right than I did when I was back there and first researching. And we're still researching, and anything that's new that comes out, we have a finger on the pulse. We know some of the top doctors all over the place. We're fortunate enough to count them as friends. And we see things as they come out. We've sort of got those lines of information going. And so the stuff that we will be bringing out it'll be new all the time. As everything comes out to humanity at the source, really, you know, as near as we can get it to this kind of knowledge. So that's it. I mean, I guess at some point here we're going to be demonstrating a bit of this by dealing with a few questions. So hang on for that, to show you what you'll get. But I mean, one thing I know Jeremy's going to mention as well. We can't talk in public exactly how we want to talk. We can't do it on this webinar. And we can't do it in the groups, and we can't do it, you know. I mean, we were all in awe of Cole Robinson the other day, who put out this really sweary 52-minute video about cancer. And it was beautiful. But of course, it got taken down from Facebook straight away. You know, we understand it. People going, oh, he's too sweary. Oh, I can't listen to all that. We're kind of choking up because it was passionate and it was beautiful and he was spot on. And this is the kind of thing, not torrents of swearing and abuse, of course, like Cole. We have a different way of going about things. But on this Human Unleashed membership site, we'll be able to talk very freely about anything, you know. And that's what I'm looking forward to, without having to think, should I say that? Should I say that? And I'm sure Jeremy is as well, because he's had to tamp down his message a lot of times over the years.
And then that's a story that comes up again and again. Even before I met you guys, you know, I've worked with other people in, let's say, the healing arts, who have been absolutely clear that there are some things that you simply cannot say in public. And that's one reason why this, what we're talking about and what we're presenting to you today is a very private working group or community of people who are going to be sharing this stuff. Now, just to take, carry on from what Graeme was saying, you know, we're not asking you to take on any particular kind of belief system. You know, you don't have to think that there's a great capitalist conspiracy out there. You know, it really does, ultimately doesn't matter. You know, what we care about is you, your health, your potential, and the life that you're going on to lead. You don't even have to believe anything we say, anything at all. All we would ask you to do is to try things out in your life, and some of the things will be easier for you to try in your life, and some things will be more challenging. And ultimately, and this is what's interesting to me. You don't have to. There's no list of, you know, you have to do all these things or else you're going to be sick. And this is why we're going to, you know, we're going to get onto this kind of. It's almost like a balancing point. It's like a level of, Graeme's already touched on it, a level of kind of barrage that our bodies and our cells are subjected to. And so, you know, I think it's worth delving a little bit more into dis-ease, right? Because Phil was literally on his arse, weren't you, Phil? You know, Phil was stuck.
Even worse, even worse.
Couldn't move. The guy was dying. You know, how many other people? Jeremy can talk for hours, if not weeks, about the people who were dying, who that he's been able to help, right? But even if you are not subject to a chronic condition at this point, there are aspects. There is a level of experience in modern life that I think the vast majority of us will relate to. And it manifests in lots of different ways. And this is the important thing. You know, there is one central dis-ease that is affecting humanity right now. And it did not used to exist. It did not exist before, right? And you know, this is what we're going to be exploring. But I mean, let's just talk, Jeremy. This would be, you know, a great point for you to jump in about, you know, what do we experience today that our ancestors almost certainly never knew, right?
Yeah, it's okay. So it's actually a very good question. And after I've, you know, finished waffling, I think Graeme should be tag team, because hopefully what I'm about to say, you know, Graeme will be going, yeah, because that's why it's so special. I've met these people, and you know, Graeme is like a filter of Jack Cruise's work. He actually, you know, makes it accessible, because Jack, as brilliant as he is, I don't think I'd even know if Jack was talking bullshit, to be honest, because he's so far over my head at times, and I have to go quite deeply. But Graeme has studied it, and the work I'm doing with Graeme and Phil on other projects to do with diagnostics and things, this is what I'm going to talk about now, and from the base of your question. So, okay. So some of this in this webinar, you know, is, you might go, what? What's he talking about? But bear with me. Okay. So ultimately, if you look back at our ancestry, particularly if you look at something like Weston Price's work, famous dentist over 100 years ago, and he wanted to discover really what was health and what was, you know, the absence of it, so to speak. Some of the things that he really found, which are very intriguing, are usually the communities that he found. And I don't want to go into dark aspects right now, but what the communities, the tribal people, whatever he found, and he went to sort of all corners of the earth. One thing that seemed to be prevalent was pure joy and happiness. They were extremely happy. They kind of knew their place, and everything just worked. And in fact, I've just begun working with some extraordinary people that are very much involved with the Amazonian tribal people, are very close to them. I'm going to meet them and the chief later on next year, which I'm very excited about, and discuss quite a few things. But he was invited into the Amazonian tribe, which is very rare, to live with them. And he said, they hardly ever talk. They're very happy. They all knew their place. Things just happen. So when you come into this day and age, several things are going on. I believe we are in this dimension, which I think is probably a more accurate description of what we're in. We're actually here to hold light. And, you know, since meeting Jack Cruise's work and Graeme's, that we're able to actually define this far more scientifically now. And even there's cameras that we're going to be using in the future that the Russians have developed, where they can actually show where you're leaking light from your cells. And that's where the physical dis-ease is, the mitochondrial dysfunction. But I actually think we're here to hold light. Now, when you hold light, and if you think about it, man has, or, you know, at least most man, meaning mankind, have sought in light, bring the light in, and then to hold it. This world's become very dark. I don't think many people would argue it's been quite chaotic, confused, and dark, which is the absence of light. And if you start to bring light into what dis-ease is, what you also see, especially with the people that I work with, the vast majority of them have lost their way. They don't know what their purpose is in life, or they, at least if they do, they certainly don't feel they have the potential to achieve it. Well, potential is a very interesting word, because at the cell level, the amount of potential you hold, or voltage, is the reason you can hold on to electrons and more light. So everything starts to come together. Now, you talk about conspiracies. I really don't think they're conspiracies, because when you see everything's upside down, if you didn't want people to be clever enough to reach their potential, which in my experience, when they do, and they're given the resources to hold light, they don't become assholes. They actually become wonderful examples of themselves, and they usually go and do good. This is what the tribal people had. They were uninterfered by civilization, and so they were very much ancestrally connected. Everything was working. They were bright and holding on to light. So if you wanted to screw around with that, with knowledge, what you'd do is you would implement just about everything, which is what has happened, that would lower one's voltage. How does one know one's voltage is low? Ask them how their energy is. I'm talking to two 19-year-olds in the last week. They said 2 out of 10. Okay, so what they're talking about is their voltage, their potential is ooh, and they're very dark and they're very, okay. So what I do is I would instigate every means possible to lower one's voltage so they can't hold light. When you can't hold light, for me, it's actually the connection to the universal internet, whatever that really is, but it's where the light and knowledge is. And if you talk, this is why I love Jack Cruise's work, and I mean, I actually don't like Graeme very much, but because he's so brilliant, I've decided to be around him and just try and let it rub off. But why I like being around Graeme is he's able to describe these things from the scientific point of view. And what happens is when you are able to hold the light, as Jack says, it's actually, there's a message in the light, like a barcode being read, imprinted on your water, which is really seen as a liquid hard drive. When those elements come together, potential is released, including physical healing. But what we usually see once people are well, and even if they're not unwell, their potential goes up, is they start to reach their human potential. That's a win-win for mankind. It's a win-win for families. It's a win-win for society. It's a win-win for community, and it's a win-win for nations. And that serves us.
Yeah, but so, you know, we've talked about, we're touching on some amazing things, but from the inside out, to borrow Phil's term, you know, what does it feel like? What is the experience of living a life of low potential? It's as simple as you experience stress. I mean, I'd imagine these guys in the Amazon, you know, the stress is all, it's like, okay, well, there's a jaguar there, I need to get away. Fight or flight, adrenaline, bang. And then the adrenaline dissipates because the threat is over, right? We live in an adrenalized state, like 7 days a week. I used to have this thing that I called Sunday night fever, right? I'd go to bed Sunday night, the weekend has been barely long enough for me to start to relax and start to wind down. And Sunday night, I get into bed and my brain is starting to go worry about all the stuff that I'm going to have to do that week and prove and perform and stuff like that. Stress and worry are absolutely fundamental things that really, I would say, have no true place in the human existence and the human life, right?
It's busyness.
Yeah,
Busyness.
you talked about energy levels. You talked about, how many of us wake up in the morning, bouncing out of bed, feeling refreshed, feeling literally recharged, because our sleep is chronic, and our bodies simply haven't had the ability, haven't been allowed to heal and repair and to recharge, literally recharge during the night. We are not recharging with our relationship to food. We're not recharging with our relationship to the earth, and all these other kinds of things that, are just, our ancestors would be appalled, right? Graeme, Jeremy wanted to tag you.
Yes. Well, what's interesting here is that, I mean, if you're listening to this live with us now, or if you've joined us for the recording, I'm sure that I think you're probably in a position where you're thinking, I would like to improve my health in some way, or I have some health issues which I'd like to address, or my family, or my parents, or whatever it is, whatever the reason is that you're here, you want to learn more or improve. And you may be trawling all over the internet and talking to different people, and you may already have people that you follow and you respect, and you decide that they've got the right idea. And so one reasonable question would be, why should I pay attention to these four guys on here? And I would say that what Jeremy said was, I'm not able to understand Jack Kruse enough to know whether it's bullshit or not. Well, I worked in stockbroking for 30 years, and it was my job to respond in real time to news and events and stories that cropped up regarding a company. So you get a company and they might say, we've got this new product, we're going to launch a new product, it's going to be worth $1 billion. Or there might be a rumor that the company was going to get taken over, or there might be a rumor that this was going to happen, that was going to happen. And that instantaneously affects the share price. And so we had to make a decision as quickly as humanly possible as to whether this was bullshit or not. So I had to become good at delving into something quickly, deciding whether the source, the background, the information was realistic, viable, truthful. I had to try and put some sort of evaluation on it. I have spent 15 years delving on the internet. Literally, I mean, the last few years in my, hopefully none of my ex-employers will be listening to this, but I spent the last 7 or 8 years, rather than working in the office, I spent most of the time delving in the internet. So I was reading and researching at work. So I probably did 7 or 8 hours of delving on a daily basis for 10 years. A vast amount. I've been down every possible rabbit hole, I think. And I'm pretty good at calling bullshit when I see bullshit. And I'm pretty good at putting stuff to one side, which I think, well, I'm not going to disregard that. I'll put it to one side. I'll come back to it later. But these things are time consuming and they're complex, and not everybody has the time, and not everybody has the inclination to go into some of these rabbit holes, because the information sources are a bit disparate, and some of them look a bit shady, but and some of the information is quite shocking and really, as Jeremy said, quite dark. But what we have done between the four of us, to differing degrees in different areas, we have delved into, let's say, 95% of the possibilities that you are likely to come across on the internet. And we've done it 10 or 15 years ago, before Google was filtered and before YouTube was filtered. So now when I search for some of the things that I know exist because I've read about them previously, I'm trying to find an article that I've read 5 years ago, I struggle to find it nowadays, because the internet has been totally filtered and sanitized by the massive search operators. And so if you're setting out today on a quest to improve your own health by building your knowledge base based on information that's out there, it's a hell of a job that's in front of you. And so I think one of the big things that we are offering people is, we are going to save you all that work, but we're not tied to any particular solution or any particular outcome. And we are, if genuine new information appears, we will incorporate it into the course. But what we're going to try to do is to cut through all the bullshit. We will disregard certain things that we're absolutely categorically certain are nonsense. And we'll put other things sort of as a possibility. But we're going to try to tie everything together in a coherent manner, which will save you literally thousands of hours. And as Phil said, that thousands of hours is it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars of time. But time is the issue. Nobody wants to spend, you know, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I've enjoyed what I'm doing and what I've done. I found it very stimulating, but I'm a bit of a weirdo in that sense. Not everybody wants to spend 8 hours a day delving into stuff. But we can bring you up to date in a matter of months.
So let's talk a little bit then, guys, about because it's the word ancestors has come up a lot of times. Let's touch on the ancestral disconnect and all the different kind of facets and the different ways in which modern humans are so far removed from even fairly recent human. I mean, so fundamentally, right, we are still Paleolithic biologically, right? Pretty much. There's very few changes. One, we've had a gene mutation in some people, excuse me, that allows us to continue to produce lactase, which lets us digest lactose or something. You know, there's a gene for that. But apart from that, we're pretty much still cave people, except for the fact that we know that we are shorter and we have smaller brains than our hunter-gatherer ancestors, right? So we are actually feebler. So it's like human evolution went up and up and up, and then something changed and it went down a bit. You know, we love to think that we are the peak of evolution, but actually we have devolved, I would say, from our ancestral peak. And there are very good reasons for that. The time of that change was when we stopped hunter-gathering and started to settle down and grow crops and keep our own animals and stuff like that, okay? So I would love to hear a bit more about the different ways in which, you know, our disconnection from our ancestral experience and existence is contributing to this, you know, constant level of dis-ease that we experience. Who wants to jump in on that?
I'll jump in on that one. I think it goes beyond you mentioned the genetic mutations and things like that. Genetic mutations are very, very rare, and they take place over vast time periods. But what really happens is you get back to the mitochondria again. Again, medicine spends most of its time focusing on the nuclear genome, and they've spent gazillions of dollars trying to sort of sequence it and then try to sort of sell tailored pharmaceuticals based on the genetic sequences that each individual might have. Whereas it's become increasingly clear in the last 30 or 40 years that it's the mitochondria that sense the environment, and they then decide which part of the genome, the nuclear genome, that they're going to use. And so we're all descended from mammals that survived the elimination of the dinosaurs. There was a massive meteorite or meteor which 65 million years ago destroyed all the dinosaurs. And some mammals survived, and by definition, some birds survived, and as we know, birds are directly descended from dinosaurs. They were able to fly away and escape. But some mammals survived, and we are evidence that the mammals survived. And so we are the descendants of those mammals. And one of the reasons that they survived was that they had a lot of mitochondria, and that their mitochondria were able to sense a change in the environment, i.e. it had become dark and cold, and they were able to adapt. And so only mammals that were able to quickly adapt were survived. They were, in sort of genetic terms, they were selected for by evolution. And so we come from that lineage. And so our mitochondrial design is one of, we take the input from the environment and we immediately respond and try to find the best possible solution or the best possible setting for our health in response to the new inputs. So what's happened over the last few hundred years, let's say, is that we've begun to invent new things such as clothing and footwear, and glasses and electric light and heated homes, transport, glass windows, all these type of things. We're terribly clever, we've introduced them, and we're not aware that they have an effect on our mitochondria. But our mitochondria sense that we're now living in a different environment. So we send our mitochondria our mitochondria receive these signals, and the mitochondria then tries to adapt. So we don't change our genetics, but we begin to express certain genes and suppress others. And that creates what we call in the modern world a disease, because a disease in many cases is really your body trying to find a solution to these subpar conditions that it finds itself living in. And if you do it on a large enough scale, some will die out and some will survive. And the ones that survive have done it right, and the ones that died out have done it wrong. And so we need to look at the way that our bodies respond as, rather than as a problem, it's actually your body always works in your own best interest. But it has to, by definition, otherwise it'd be suicidal, wouldn't it? So your body's trying to find a solution, and it's sending you messages telling you the changes it's making, and you feel those, and we refer to those as symptoms. So you can either go with the flow and say, well, let's hope my body figures it out over the next, but of course Mother Nature doesn't care about one individual. It doesn't care about a million individuals. It cares about the fact that 10% of them might be successful over the long term and they'll survive in an evolutionary context. But what we have to think about is those decisions which a mitochondria are taking automatically for you trigger what we call symptoms.
And modern medicine is allopathic in the sense that it concerns itself with symptoms and is
in trying to suppress the symptoms.
Extremely poor job at understanding, or never mind trying to treat or address the root causes.
So the symptoms are interesting, but you need to understand what has provoked the change in the mitochondria to provoke those symptoms. And then when you strip it back, you can see that the inputs, some of the inputs you're experiencing are damaging from your lifestyle choices, from your food choices, from your sleep, from your environment, all sorts of different things. And once you understand what's going on, you can begin to strip out the most damaging aspects, and you can begin to emphasize the most healing aspects. And you begin to restore balance to your mitochondria, and they begin to then express the correct genes and suppress the correct genes, and everything returns to a sense of balance.
So you guys don't have to have an in-depth understanding of what the hell mitochondria are. If you're sitting there at home thinking, what's this mitochondria word? So I think just very simply, one thing that we need to appreciate is that while we think of ourselves as human beings and individuals, we are in fact massive symbiotic colonies of some human cells, mitochondria, which actually inhabits most or all of the cells in our body that produce the energy that our cells use and are not strictly necessarily human. And apart from that, heaps of different types of bacteria, not least all the bacteria that inhabit our gut in the gut biome, which is a completely whole section. And so what Graeme's been talking about is the fact that to put it crudely, our bodies overall, our beings, are subjected to a whole range of signals and inputs, right, from our environment that we have never had to deal with before in our entire evolutionary history, right? And our bodies, here's a really interesting thing that I've learned from these guys. Our bodies are actually incredibly good at repairing and healing themselves, right? The problem is that we are so immersed and bombarded in crazy, confusing signals from our environment now that our bodies simply are almost not allowed to do what they do so well and to repair and to heal ourselves. So guys, the clock is ticking, but let's whiz through some of those areas of modern life, compare them to the life that even a few hundred years, a few thousand years, tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors would have done. So let's start to sketch out some of the scope of what the Human Unleashed is going to address, right? So Phil, do you want to start off with some of that?
Yeah, I think if you look at what we did, in a day, you'd get up, you'd hunt, you'd get enough food, you'd hang around, you'd sort your shelter out, you'd move camp if you needed to. It was a simple lifestyle, and that's kind of what that's what we're designed for. And because we're now so focused on all of the stresses of modern life, we don't find ways to our higher self. It always used to amuse me when people used to go and see these ancestral tribes and call them savages, because they have so much more insight. They understand how nature works together. They understand how, somebody once said, probably out of India somewhere, that the all suffering is born of duality. And I think this is the ultimate ancestral disconnect, of not realizing how we are connected to each other and connected to all of nature. And when you understand that, you can also really pretty easily understand diet and understand exercise, the kind of exercise that we used to do. And it was never running on a treadmill with headphones in, pumping, EMFs into our ears, watching blue screens inside. It's just insane what people do when they think they're going to get well. All of the ways that we're taught now to get well, it's utter nonsense. Eat low-fat diets, exercise in a gym, and cover yourself in devices. People got all these Fitbits and stuff and all this nonsense. What happened to actually our intuition? This is the thing. Actually understanding ourselves and understanding the intuition. And we want to be able to give you back the intuition of how to be your own doctor. This is the important thing. And it's in a way, it's not a great business model, because we actually want to see you get well, and the money's in the sick people. But to do these little tweaks, webinar by webinar, month by month, in a little while, I hope we're going to take, I think there was a few questions came in that we're going to be able to deal with. And what I'd love to do, if it's all right with everybody, is to do like a quick fire thing, which won't be how we do it in webinars, because we just go deeper and deeper and deeper. But if we could just give you an example of how we can show all these disconnects and how they relate to every single question that anybody might pose to us. If we take these questions, we could just do 2 minutes each and just go blasting through and show the different aspect, the different viewpoints that we have, and how that creates a great whole and a great perspective where you have this sort of 360 view of every problem, every question, that kind of thing. And all of it is based on what Ben was asking, which is all the ancestral disconnects that are just in pretty much every single area of our life, and show you how easy it is not to have to go live in a cave, but how to enjoy everything that you already do and more, and not have all this fear all the time. Fear of getting sick, losing your money, this. There's always some fear that we're living by. And when you start to see the whole thing as this massive con, but it's a massive joke as well. No need to get angry about it. It's really funny what's going on in a way. It's heartbreaking, but it's funny because you can see the way out, see this big tide of information coming up. So that's how I see it. Just, everything piling in to stop us realizing that we're all basically one organism, part of nature. We're so disconnected from nature. And that's it. The disconnect from nature in every area: diet, light, emotional stuff, social interactions, Absolutely everything. And this can all, you get one of these things wrong when you already have some disease, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of it.
And aren't we are the only animal in the entire natural world that worries about what to eat, that worries about what to do, that
Yeah.
worries about its parents, that worries about why am I here? What am I meant to be doing in my life? Have I taken a wrong bloody turn at some point like that? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Ben, well, I was just going to jump in if I make it very quickly. I think what we've done is we have a superior brain to most animals. And we've got this ability to think. But the problem is we've become overconfident and arrogant, and we believe that if we can think it through logically using the skills that we have learned scientifically, we think that's superior to anything else. And I used to be the worst offender of this, because I was the absolute most annoying, logical, black and white person. And I dismissed all sort of woo-woo nonsense.
You were an arse. That's the technical word you're looking for.
Yeah, no, worse. I was beyond arse. And I have learned, thanks in many ways, to once I began to understand the light-water magnetism connection, and I began to see how the mitochondrial colonies throughout our body were sensing and adjusting constantly, trillions of times a second throughout our entire lives, you soon realize that your subconscious, of which I don't think the subconscious resides in the brain, I think the subconscious resides in the body as a whole. And the subconscious, as most people will tell you, is 100 times or 1,000 times bigger and more important than your conscious brain activity. And so what we're trying to suggest is you need to step back from the logical thinking and begin to listen to your subconscious, your gut, your whatever you want to refer to it. But your body knows best, and your brain can only try to interpret what your body's actually trying to do. And so many times we try and look at what our body's doing and we think it's doing something wrong. But it would be extremely foolish if you allowed your brain to think that your body would ever do something that wasn't in your best interest. So somehow or other, we need to kind of get people to see that they need to trust their body, and their body will fix itself as long as they get out of the way. But getting out of the way is easier said than done.
And yet modern culture would have us believe that, only medical intervention can help, and it sees problems where there aren't problems, and it gives us problems when there didn't used to be problems before. Okay, so
Can I just say something on that quickly? Is that all right, Ben?
Yeah.
You can shout at me later off camera, but just running along with what Graeme said and Ben, the problem is, and by the time you have, you've actually, if you have manifested some sort of physical condition that doctors can find, and you've been given a diagnosis, and by the way, diagnosis is 3 words: diagnosis. Gnosis means to know, ag means not, and die means two. So it's literally 2 people not knowing what the fuck's going on, which is very beneficial in the way how medicine works, because it's then dictated how they must treat you. But by the time you've actually manifested something physical, I can assure you, and the Chinese cultures knew this, that you've been in dis-ease for at least 2 years, but often very much longer. And when we're talking, what Graeme said was absolutely right, that what he's talking about subconscious is we're talking about traumas, we're talking about belief systems, and belief systems that may not be positive for your well-being. We're dealing about a lot of things that are held, and I believe they're held in the water as a biological hard drive, but they're held in there. And I know that some people are quite interested in hearing about trauma. If you go to the extreme level of trauma, there's a body of medicine which has been highly criticized, as it usually is when it's more correct in my experience, called German New Medicine, which has been able to show that when there's trauma, so I'm talking about shocks, divorces, murders, deaths, whatever, infidelities, things that are, rather than the day-to-day traumas, which are more like jabbing, wearing you down, which are relevant. But those sort of traumas, and indeed the milder day-to-day ones, get registered actually in the brain. It can actually be seen in scans, and whatever part of the brain that is actually registered in is where it will start to manifest in the body if it is not resolved. And so if you're going to help people, even if they don't have a diagnosis of any sort, what we're really talking about is removing stress. And when we're talking about stress, we're actually talking about removing noise. So we have to find if that's dis-ease, depending on where you are within that, and that is sort of not in disease, and that's healing and thriving. We have to literally find all the aspects in your particular environment, because some people we deal are in the country, some people are in cities, apartment blocks. We have to find all the elements that are noise, informational input into your water, which is not enabling you to allow your God-given intuitive instincts to rise up and know what to do. And in my experience, when you focus people, they do know what's right and wrong for them. They're usually in busyness or fear or both, and are unable or believe they're unable to start to change those aspects, which will lead to disease. And in this course, we're going to share with you all of those that we're aware of. From some are quite extreme to some people's minds, down to the more unfamiliar and what have you. But once you put it into the context of philosophy and understand that, this is why, by the way, eating a pineapple in the middle of Toronto with 3 feet of snow in the middle of winter, from a nutritional point of view, a standard nutritionist, is very good for you. From an actual ancestral light message noise point of view, your body's like, what the fuck? It's grown in the tropics. It was picked in the summer, what have you, flown over. So from an informational point of view, just that one thing, or a mango, or whatever it is part of the chaos, the noise that needs to be dampened down until you can hear what you need to do. And it will come up, and many I've worked with will share that with you.
Awesome. So we have some questions. So I just want to throw some of these out. We haven't got time to talk in much depth, and I want to leave a few minutes at the end just to describe how the program works and how you can get on it. Okay. So big one, addressing mental health. Somebody who's been on a carnivore diet for a year, which is one of the resets that we talk about. Severe post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and anxiety, no longer on any meds. What else besides diet can I do to help?
Okay, so I'll go really quick, really fast on this with a couple of little observations. I think the main thing is healing the gut. Depends entirely how you're structuring this carnivore diet. Also, once the gut is healed, you find that an enormous amount of the mental problems go away. Obviously, there are a load of other things that happen that can be brought into play. I have this vision always in this instance of hosing the mud off the car before you polish it. So if you really are sure, it would have to be gone into great detail how you're structuring that carnivore diet, because you can still do a carnivore diet and not heal up the gut. It's not a magic bullet just because it's called a carnivore diet. I think it's great, but you can do it wrong. Sorry, that sounds a bit vegan, doesn't it? But yes, you can, when you're trying to heal the gut, but it shouldn't take 9 years or anything. Yeah. And then after that, there are so many things, light is so important in mental health. If you're not getting the light right, I'm going to shut up and let Graeme take that one a bit further. God, it's so difficult, isn't it? We're trying to go through these things quick. You can see me bursting, and I know that the other two guys have more knowledge of this than me. So, you can see that if you come into the group, you're going to get huge detail on this. I could ramble on for 15 minutes. I reckon the other two guys could ramble on for an hour. Now, let's whiz over to them about it. So Graeme, and then...
Okay, quick one. Assuming you've got your diet right and there's filters, you're healing the gut. In order to recover from anything, you need sleep, and sleep is driven by light cycles. And if you're not sleeping properly, you're not gonna heal. So you need more sunshine during the day, and you need zero artificial light after dark to get your circadian rhythms back on track, so that you're out building. You need direct sunlight on the eye, no glasses, no sunglasses, no contact lenses. You're trying to rebuild dopamine in the brain. You're trying to rebuild melatonin. That's done in the daylight outside. and then you want to be sleeping. You could also use cold therapy, cold water immersion. It's particularly good for raising dopamine, and it's particularly good for depression and mental health issues. I'll pass on to Jeremy.
But good news that the you know, off the meds as well, because there are natural ways of achieving naturally and more reliably what those meds were papering over.
Yeah, that could also delay the healing. I'm sure Jeremy will go into that. Tailing down from them.
Whoever's asking this question, if they're off their meds, you know, I take my hat off to you. You're really quite extraordinary to begin with. Well done. But there's more. And we're just subtitles here rather than going into detail. But some of the things that you need to understand is that the traumas, whether you did them and there's guilt attached to them, or they were done to you, or a mixture of whatever, are registered in your body. They are physically registered in your body. You will know where you feel them by when you recall them. You'll feel it in your body. The emotion that is connected to that in Chinese medicine will show you which organ is most in dis-ease in that sort of level. So that's kind of things I would look for to see which organs need the most support to enable that emotion to be released. Now, the next thing, and this is very important, when you've had trauma, you are constantly locked pretty much in the fight or flight response, and the vagus nerve is going nuts. So there are several wonderful areas to start to focus on to actually take yourself out of fight or flight, which is a physiological state or of the autonomic nervous system where your whole physiology will not work properly. So if you're still in that, even though you're using a carnivore diet, which is, you know, there are other diets, but carnivore is, but in my experience, just superior, fatty carnivore diet. But if you're in fight or flight, physiologically, you cannot digest things as well as someone who is actually not in that state. So you need to recognize that. And there's several wonderful methods that you might be interested in. Number one is singing. Even if you're appalling singer, singing actually resonates at the back of the occiput and here where the vagus nerve exits. Vagus is the wandering nerve. And it will start to relax it. There's actually a movement for people that have had vagal innervation issues where they're in fight or flight called punk choral music. They're all over the world now. So it's kind of choral music choir with attitude, and they're doing wonderful things, and people's healths are changing dramatically. The second one is laughter. You'll hear it said that laughter is the best medicine, and then no one uses it when they need it the most, because they say, what the fuck have I got to laugh about? You know, it's exactly when you need it. And there's a chap called Norman Cousins, and I think he wrote the book, The Anatomy of Disease or The Anatomy of Illness, and his website is something like the University of Life or something like that, but Norman Cousins. And he healed himself from a terminal illness by literally locking him away and laughing and watching and reading just everything that made him, you know, belly laugh. And please understand that one of the reasons that helped is because it relaxes the vagus nerve, puts you back out of fight or flight, and so you're in a different neurological state to enable and advance healing. And the third one in this short frame, I could talk all day on these things, and I think Phil used it, and like every man, he thought, well, I don't need this, and of course he was wrong. But is EFT, or emotional freedom technique, often called tapping. And if you look at it, when you first look at it, you just kind of laugh and think, how on earth do you think that's going to help me? But in my experience, veterans, I've helped a reasonable amount of veterans, SAS, ex-SAS, and police, and all kinds of things. But in my experience, people that have used EFT who have had combat trauma and quite extreme trauma, it's a wonderful way of releasing. And I think one more fourth I'm going to add on there is Bach flower remedies, which were designed. They work at subtler levels, but they're not to be just discarded. I hope that helps whoever's listening. But well done what you've done so far.
I can vouch for EFT as well. I had one session of EFT, and it totally helped my body to heal quite acute tennis elbow that I'd had for about 4 years in one session. Now, Mike has sent through 9 absolutely awesome questions covering stuff like, you know, cook versus raw food, earthing, microwaving, cosmetics, cold temperature. I can only pick one, so I want to pick. If one is full carnivore, and are there still worthwhile benefits to occasional extended fasting? If yes, then what are the benefits and what kind of fasting regimen would you suggest? And let's try and do this in 2 minutes, guys.
Okay. What I would say, it depends entirely on your on what it is that you're trying to achieve with this. You know, some people might want to use a fasting routine to get really cut. Somebody, it depends on your starting point, basically. If you're very, very sick and you've got pancreatic cancer, then absolutely fasting routines, dry fasting, then into fasting on snake juice, and then refeeds with the carnivore diet would be absolutely the best way to go on a dietary level. But if, you know, a paleo mediciner in Hungary, they, you know, Zofia Clements, our friends Zofia Clements and Chabatot, are doing fantastic work with not fasting people and just using a very, very high fat diet for reversing things. But again, I would say it depends on your starting point. If you want to get really ripped, then there are ways to do it. If you're very muscly and almost at your goal, you know, and you've lost all the fat or whatever, and the body's working beautifully, it's a very different situation for being 100 pounds overweight with a couple of tumors and diabetes. You know, it entirely depends on that. But yes, it can be very useful.
So like, just to sum up a lot of what we're saying, there are so many areas that we will be touching on in the Human Unleashed. We haven't even mentioned
in detail
most of them, honestly. So, you know, we want to take the last few minutes just to tell you about the program itself. Phil is still with us as an ethereal pink ghost.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, I can reach over there and put the light on, but I just don't want to. When you feel the light going down naturally in the evening, you just, and you haven't used these artificial lights for a while, they're just gruesome. It's bad enough having the red screen on my computer just lighting me up now. Really, yeah. The stuff that we can go into about light and how wonderful it feels, you know, a lot of people would just say, sod it, I'll just turn the light on. But I don't want to do that. You know, if I disappear, I disappear. I can sleep tonight, you know.
I should have my blue blockers on now because the birds have gone to bed. Anyway, so a little bit about the Human Unleashed program. It's a rolling membership. It's a community that we are inviting you to join. It's not going to be huge. We are limiting the numbers, and specifically what we are launching today with this webinar. Even if you're watching it recorded, if you can see this webinar, this is still open. We are launching the Founders Group for the Human Unleashed. So what is the Founders Group? The Founders Group is a bunch of people that will be working more closely with these three guys, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to, this isn't just a one-way delivery of information, right? Although the information is absolutely incredible, I can vouch for it. I've been around these guys for a few months now. My life has changed irrevocably, right? So, you know, for good, okay? So the Founders Group, this is the way it's going to work. We're going to have a secret social media group that nobody else can get into, first of all, okay? But you will have access to the team. The team will have access to you. You'll have access to each other, right? As founders. We will be running bi-weekly online webinars like this one, where your questions that you submit, right, all about how can I apply and implement the various recommendations, right? Because there are numerous recommendations. There are so many levels. There are so many sources of bizarre confusion in life that, and for each one, there are solutions, okay? How can I apply these in my life? How can I make this work for me, right? And we will address those, because what we want to do is we want the Human Unleashed program to be built around real people, real lives, okay? By the way, there's one completely other area that we haven't even touched on, which is the Human Unleashed Money Unleashed. That's just one of the programs in there, because a lot of people are going to be at home going, okay, well, you know, you're saying I need to buy blue blocking glasses, or I need to, you know, what if I need to quit my job? What if my job is making me sick, okay? We're going to look at all of that stuff. We're going to look at real practical ways that you can make the changes in your day-to-day lifestyle that you really, really need to make. And believe me, your guts, your heart will be telling you already. You already know a lot of this stuff. And by the time you've consumed even like the first few hours of information, there's plenty of hours to come, you will know. You will know. Okay, so we're launching the Founders Group today. We're limiting it strictly to a maximum of 250 people. That is the biggest community that we can manage. We can only have 100 people on a webinar, for example, so that number kind of makes sense. There is a code. If somebody comes across this and they want to join, it would be, the fee is $127 per month, right? But if you're watching this webinar, which means you're probably part of Phil's group or you've been following Jeremy or Graeme for a while, you go along to thehumanunleashed.com/course. That's where you can sign up, right? You click little link that says sign up here and you put in the code, all in capital letters, founder, FOUNDER, and that will drop the monthly membership from $127 to $67 a month, which is about £55, 55 euros if you're in Europe, okay? And for that, you're getting 2 webinars per month. You're getting access to this incredible team. You're getting 24/7 access to the social media group that we have not yet created, but we will be doing. And you get to be part of forming this course. And then after that, where you want to take it, where we want to take it, we don't know. Right? It's open-ended. This is a journey. We are inviting you to come on the journey with us. I mean, I can speak from a perspective that's more like your own because I've only recently been exposed to these 3 geniuses, lunatics, whatever you want to say. But the material has already fundamentally changed my life. I'm sleeping better. I'm eating better. I'm happier. I'm more content. I'm more stress-free. All that kind of stuff. Guys, we're in the last minute. I want to give each of you just the opportunity to say a few words, if somebody's in 2 minds about whether this is for them.
I think another aspect that Ben might not have stressed is we've already recorded an enormous amount of material, which is going to be released on there on the website. We've sat down and we've talked for hours about all sorts of things that you would be asking anyway.
And
so you've got
all of that instantly as soon as you join.
So. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So you've got hours of material there already. You don't have to wait for the webinars. But then if specific questions come up, it's like I'm kind of jittery in my seat here because we had to answer those questions in about 2 minutes. And I can think of 1,000 things on each one that we could have gone into. And we will do in tremendous detail. And a lot of it is already in the material there. I can't really call it course material, but available for members now. So, join up and check out this great time we had in the Lake District for a couple of days, just recording some wonderful stuff, having a load of fun. And then at Ben's house another time. Ben's got this great house, got a big load of land in the country, and it's a great place. So we've done all that stuff's out there. You got the webinars, you got access to us, 3 perspectives on every question you want to ask. Come on, just sign up. It's going to be so much fun. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I just want to add to that we're also going to be doing podcasts. The 3 of us together are quite connected to a lot of people, so there's going to be some fabulous content coming in. And we're really going to do, at least for the founders, because after it grows beyond that, which we expect, it's going to be quite challenging to offer, what we're going to be giving to all of you, the level of support anyway. But it's an ongoing conversation because within the groups that come in, there's going to be knowledge. So we hope to put people together that will work together, which is what we're doing, to go and do their own things, whether that be healing or business or whatever. So there is just so much that we couldn't even possibly begin to communicate in 90 minutes. But hopefully either you know us or you're beginning to know us and love us and resonate with us, and sign up, buckle up, and enjoy the ride.
And also one other thing, we're going to also be bringing in specialists in various fields occasionally. You know, so we'll have one person on in a particular subject, and people probably that you admire and people that you know would take requests for this kind of thing, get people in. And because they'll be in this safe space, they'll be able to talk also about things that they might not be able to talk about in public. So to get access to some real monsters of knowledge unleashed, come and check it out too.
Yeah, one final thing I want to add is that we, in general, as you can probably see, we have the ability to come up with an answer for almost any question, but that doesn't mean that we know all the answers. And if we don't know, we will say that we don't know, and we'll go away, research it and dig around and scratch our heads and talk to each other, and we'll come back with hopefully a better response. So on the odd occasion that we get left, or that you get left with no answer, which I think will be quite rare, we are absolutely happy to admit that we don't know, and we'll wander off and come back to you as soon as we can.
In fact, we look forward to those times because it opens up new rabbit holes. We're always ready for, you know, it's a law of diminishing returns. When you've been at this for years and years and years, we listen to the same old stuff, little takes on it. If a real interesting new rabbit hole opens up, give it to us because we'll all jump down it. We love it.
And they do, and they do every week.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, what do you hope to get out of this? What are we promising you out of this? On one level, health and vitality. You know, obviously, you know, it depends on your situation right now. We can't promise, you know, if you're paraplegic, we can't promise that you're going to be doing cartwheels tomorrow. You know, but you know, within reason, the techniques and the things that you can apply that these guys will be teaching you will combine in some way to unlock levels of health, vitality, energy. And what that does is it then opens up doors to your own personal performance. Whatever's important to you, it opens new doors, right? For you to do what's important to you in life. Okay, so this isn't just about health, this isn't just about diet and all of that stuff. This is about your journey. Why the hell are you here in this lifetime, on this planet, at this particular point in time? You know, let's do the best that we can do. Let's be the best versions of ourselves that we can be.
I think what we've done over the years is to get so many little nuggets from so many disciplines, so many little diamonds from little piles of dog shit, you know, so that you can just get these diamonds without getting poo on your fingers. There you go.
Perfect. Can't say anything better than that. If you do have any questions once we've finished, there is a contact form, Ben, on the website. We'll answer them, and we'll get the Facebook group up soon as well. But thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the Human Unleashed community.